Darius Langston had everything: money, power, privacy. Most people had only seen him in magazines or tech conference videos. He didn't do interviews, didn't show up to parties, and definitely didn't trust easily. So when the news broke that he had collapsed during a weekend retreat in the Hamptons, the world was shocked. He was found alone on the floor of his study, eyes open but not moving. His private chef had called emergency services after noticing Darius hadn't come out for breakfast. Within hours, a helicopter flew him to a high-end private hospital just outside New York City. Doctors ran tests and said he was in a coma. Brain activity? Minimal. Movement? None. The world assumed the worst. Reporters camped outside. Investors panicked. His company's stock dipped overnight. But Darius wasn't in a coma. Not really. He could hear everything. He could feel the cold sheets, the warmth of the sun creeping through the curtains, and the soft buzzing of machines next to his bed. He just couldn't move. And that wasn't by accident. A few weeks before the incident, Darius had begun to suspect that someone close to him was plotting to take over his company. Little signs started to show: emails that didn't make sense, backdoor meetings, missing files. He had trusted the wrong people. Instead of confronting them, he decided to go quiet and observe. When the collapse happened, he realized it was the perfect cover. He decided to play along. So now he lay still, pretending, waiting. Day after day, he listened to people come and go. Some whispered as if he was already gone. Others spoke freely, assuming he couldn't hear a word. But Darius was taking notes in his head. He remembered every voice, every slip-up, every name. And then she walked in. Nina Collins, the night nurse, didn't know much about him. To her, he was just another patient. But unlike the others, she didn't treat him like furniture. She greeted him softly, brought him warm cloths, played music during the quiet hours. Sometimes she read aloud from her journal. Other times, she just talked to fill the silence. "You probably can't hear me," she said one night, fluffing his pillow, "but it feels better talking to someone." And Darius listened. For the first time in weeks, he felt human. Not just a billionaire lying in a hospital bed, but a man. And without even knowing it, Nina was becoming the most important person in the room. Not because she was kind, not because she was gentle, but because soon she would say something that would change everything. And Darius Langston, trapped in his own body, would be the only one to hear it. It was only day 4 in the hospital when Darius started hearing things that confirmed his suspicions. His younger brother Malcolm showed up first. He hadn't seen Malcolm in over a year, not since a heated argument over money. Malcolm had always wanted a bigger piece of the family business, but Darius never trusted him with that kind of power. Now, Malcolm stood at the edge of the hospital bed, arms crossed, fake sadness in his voice. "Poor Darius," he said with a sigh. "All that money and nothing to show for it now. Maybe it's time someone else steps up and takes control." Darius felt a chill, not from the room, but from the words. He wasn't surprised, but it still stung. Malcolm wasn't the only one. A few hours later, Maya, Darius's executive assistant, walked in with a folder full of paperwork and her phone glued to her ear. "Yes, Terrence," she said quietly. "He's still unresponsive. The doctors don't seem hopeful. If you want that vote to happen, it has to be this week." Terrence Bishop. Darius had known him for 10 years. He was one of the senior board members at Langston Innovations, always smiling, always helpful. But now Darius saw the truth. Terrence wanted him out. Gone. Permanently. Maya ended the call and stood next to the bed. She stared down at him, her voice lower now. "You should have listened to me," she whispered. "But it's too late." Darius wanted to scream. He wanted to open his eyes and sit up. Instead, he lay frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew exactly what they were trying to do. If they could prove he was mentally unfit, the board could vote to replace him. His shares would be frozen, and everything he built, his company, his inventions, his legacy, would be taken from him. But Darius wasn't giving up. Each day, he paid close attention. Even the smallest details mattered. The way Maya checked her phone whenever she thought no one was looking. How Malcolm kept showing up with lawyers. How the company's logo had suddenly changed on one of the files she left behind. Something big was happening, and they were rushing it. He had to act fast. But how? The answer didn't come from a lawyer or a doctor. It came late at night, during Nina's shift. She walked in humming softly, a cup of tea in one hand and a tablet in the other. She pulled up a chair and started talking like she always did. But that night, she said something different, something that made Darius listen harder than ever. You know, she said, almost laughing, I used to work for your company. Years ago, before everything went downhill for me. Darius wanted to blink, wanted to move, wanted to speak. Instead, he waited, because something told him this story was just getting started. Nina didn't know anyone was really listening when she spoke. She thought Darius Langston, this billionaire lying still and silent, was just gone inside, like the others said. But still, every night during her shift, she talked to him. She believed deep down that some part of him could hear her. And she liked the quiet comfort of speaking without being judged. She sat beside his bed and adjusted the monitor, same as always. Then she looked at him, his face calm, barely changing. She smiled a little. Funny thing, she said, settling into the chair. You probably don't remember me, but I remember you. Darius's heartbeat just a little faster. I was an intern at Langston Innovations, she continued, 3 years ago. Fresh out of college, full of ideas. I thought I'd make a difference. She paused, looking around like she was making sure no one else was listening. I had this project, she said softly. A security program that could detect fake accounts and cyber threats. Small but powerful. I pitched it to the team, and they said they'd look into it. Then I got laid off 2 weeks later. She gave a dry laugh, not bitter, just tired. Months later, your company launched a tool called ShieldLock. Looked a lot like mine. Even had the same name for one of the core codes. But no one gave me credit. No mention. Nothing. Darius felt like someone had dropped a weight on his chest. He remembered that program. It had made millions. ShieldLock had helped protect hospitals, schools, and small businesses. It was one of the company's proudest achievements. And now, he was hearing that it may have come from this woman, his night nurse. I didn't fight it, she said, looking down at her hands. I couldn't afford a lawyer. I had bills. My mom was sick. I just let it go. Figured, maybe the world wasn't fair. Darius could barely process what he was hearing. This woman, the one helping him every night, had been wronged by his company. By him. And she never said a word about it until now. Anyway, Nina said, standing up, just thought I'd share that little story. Weird what we admit to people who can't talk back, huh? She smiled gently, brushed a loose curl behind her ear, and walked out of the room. Darius stared at the ceiling, completely still on the outside. But on the inside, everything was moving. He didn't just owe her an apology. He owed her the truth. He had to find out what really happened back then. Who took her idea? Who signed off on it? And most of all, he had to make it right. But before he could fix anything, he had to survive this silent war around him. And for that, he needed help. Nina came in the next night, a little later than usual. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept much. She didn't hum this time, didn't joke, just walked in quietly and sat beside Darius's bed, staring at the floor for a long time. Darius could feel the mood shift. Something was wrong. It's been a rough day, she said finally. Her voice was soft, like it might break if she spoke too loud. I got a call from the bank. They're moving forward with the foreclosure. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. Darius listened closely, every word hitting harder than the last. My mom's house, she said. The one she raised me in. She's been sick, and I've been covering everything. Bills, medicine, food, and now I can't keep up anymore. Darius wanted to move, to do something, but he stayed frozen, helpless again. Nina shook her head slowly. I keep thinking, maybe if I'd fought back when they took my project, things would be different. Maybe I'd have the money. Maybe I'd have a better job. Maybe my mom wouldn't be losing her home. She looked over at him, her eyes glossy but holding back tears. You know what the worst part is? She whispered. I looked up to you. I really did. I used to tell people, this guy's different. Darius Langston listens to ideas. He actually cares. Darius felt like he couldn't breathe. But you didn't listen. Not really, she said. Or maybe you did, and you just didn't care. Then her voice softened again. But here I am, taking care of you anyway. Isn't that something? She gave a sad little laugh, then stood up and adjusted his blanket. Don't worry, I'm not mad anymore. I let go of that a long time ago. Life's too short for bitterness. Darius stared at the ceiling, his heart full of guilt. He wanted to say he didn't know, that someone else must have stolen her work, that if he'd seen her idea, he would have done the right thing. But right now, none of that mattered. She didn't need excuses. She needed justice. Nina turned to leave, but paused at the door. "I don't know why I told you all that," she said over her shoulder. "Maybe it's easier talking to someone who can't talk back." And then she left. The door clicked shut. Inside his mind, Darius made a decision. He wouldn't let her story end like this. She deserved more than a quiet confession in a hospital room. She deserved to be heard. And if he wanted to make that happen, he had to take the next step. He had to find someone he could trust, someone who believed in miracles and second chances. The next morning, a familiar voice entered Darius's room. It wasn't a nurse or a board member. It was Dr. Julian Ward, an old friend Darius hadn't seen in years. He was a quiet man, one of the few Darius actually trusted. They had once worked together on a tech project involving brain signals and micromovement detection. Now, Julian was standing over him, reading his chart. "They call me in for a second opinion," he said softly, almost like he was talking to himself. "But I know you, Darius. You don't go down this easy." He looked straight at Darius's face. "If you're in there, blink twice." Darius focused every bit of energy he had and blinked twice. Julian didn't flinch. He just nodded like he expected it. "That's what I thought," he whispered. Over the next 2 nights, Julian returned in secret. He brought a small device no bigger than a coin, hidden in his coat pocket. He placed it on the corner of the hospital bed rail. It looked like nothing special, but it was actually a tiny camera with a voice trigger. It would record anyone who entered the room and spoke above a whisper. "They don't know you're listening," Julian said quietly, "but now, you'll be listening too." Darius blinked once in agreement. The plan was simple. Let the snakes reveal themselves. The first to slip up was Maya. She came in late that night, alone, with her phone to her ear again. "We don't have much time," she said into the phone. "Julian's asking too many questions. And if Darius wakes up, everything falls apart." The next day, Malcolm came by. He paced the room, looking nervous. "We'll move his shares to the holding account tomorrow," he muttered. "After that, declare him unfit. We need Bishop to push it through the board." Then came Terrence, Bishop himself. He entered the room, closed the blinds, and leaned in close to Darius's face. "You should have seen it coming, old friend," he said coldly. "You built an empire, but you forgot. Empires always fall. And I'm just helping yours along." The camera caught it all. Sound, video, proof. Now, Darius had what he needed. That evening, Julian reviewed the footage on his tablet. Nina walked in during a shift and caught a glimpse of the screen. She saw Malcolm's face, heard Maya's voice, recognized Terrence. "What is this?" she asked. Julian looked up, unsure of how much to say. "They're trying to take everything from him," he said. "But now we have proof." Nina stared at the screen, then at Darius. "He heard me, didn't he?" Julian nodded. "Yes, and you were right about everything." She sat down, heart racing. Things were moving fast now. And the quiet man in the hospital bed? He was about to make his move. The next morning, Nina came in early, earlier than usual. She didn't smile this time. She had too much on her mind. The video from the night before kept replaying in her head. All those people, smiling in public, planning behind Darius's back. She looked at him closely now, differently. Not just as a patient, but as a fighter. Julian arrived 30 minutes later with a small case. He closed the door behind him and nodded at Nina. "You sure about this?" she asked. "It's time," he said simply. He opened the case and pulled out a thin headset with small sensors. It looked like something from a science lab. They carefully placed it on Darius's head. It was part of an old prototype Darius had once helped build, technology that could pick up brain signals and convert them into basic commands. Left, right, yes, no. Julian tapped a few keys on his tablet. The screen lit up. "Okay," he said, looking at Darius. "Blink once for yes. Twice for no. We'll start slow." Darius blinked once. Nina leaned in, her eyes wide with hope. "Can you hear us right now?" Julian asked. "One blink. Are you ready to fight back?" One blink. Nina smiled, a real one this time. "Let's do it then." They spent the next few hours testing the signals. The machine responded well. Darius was able to answer yes or no questions, even choose from a list of words by focusing his eyes. He chose one word first: lawyer. Julian made a secure call to Darius's longtime attorney, Martin Hale, a man Darius trusted more than anyone outside of tech. Martin arrived later that night under the name Visitor from Langston's legal team, just to avoid attention. Inside the room, he was stunned to see Darius respond with clear, timed blinks. "This changes everything," Martin whispered. "But we need a plan." Over the next few hours, the room turned into a quiet war room. Nina stood by the door, keeping watch. Julian worked the tablet. Martin gathered details from the surveillance recordings and helped Darius form short messages using the eye-tracking system. The message they built together was short but powerful. "They're stealing my company. I'm conscious. I have proof. Help me stop them." Martin recorded the message on video, with Darius blinking out each word slowly. The device translated it on screen in real time. It was enough to prove he was awake, enough to take to the board. But they couldn't move too soon. "If they find out we know," Martin said, "they'll bury this before we even step into a courtroom." Julian nodded. "We need the perfect moment." And it was coming. The company's emergency board meeting was scheduled for Friday, just 3 days away. Darius blinked once. Yes, the countdown had begun. Friday morning came fast. The hospital was quiet, but the mood in Darius's room was full of tension. Nina helped him get ready, even though he was still in bed. The plan was simple but bold. Martin would attend the board meeting with the evidence. Julian had already connected a live video feed to a hidden camera in the room. They were going to let the board see that Darius was not only alive, but aware. By 9 a.m., the boardroom at Langston Innovations was full. The company's top members sat around the long glass table. Malcolm walked in wearing a sharp suit and a fake calm expression. Maya followed, carrying files, looking overly confident. And Terrence Bishop stood at the head of the table, like he already owned the place. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Terrence said. "As you know, Darius's condition has not improved. After today, we will vote to transfer company control." He was interrupted by the door opening. Martin Hale walked in. "Not so fast," he said, placing a laptop on the table. "You weren't invited," Terrence said coldly. "I don't need an invitation. I'm here as Darius Langston's legal representative, and he has a message for you." Martin pressed play. The screen lit up with live video from the hospital. Darius lay in bed, sensors on his head, eyes focused. The room went quiet. On the screen, words appeared one by one, matched with his blinking and tracking. "Wham! Awake." The board members leaned in. "You try to take everything. I have proof." Malcolm shifted in his seat. Maya's face went pale. "You're all caught. This ends now." Martin then showed short clips, recordings of Maya's late-night calls, Malcolm's plan to move shares, Terrence's private threats. By the time the videos ended, the room was dead silent. "This footage," Martin said calmly, "along with medical testimony and a full report from Dr. Julian Ward, will be submitted to the courts. And if needed, the press." Terrence stood up. "This is a stunt. A cheap one." "No," a board member said quietly. "This is real." The oldest board member, Mrs. Porter, cleared her throat. She had been quiet the whole time. Now, her voice was sharp. "I vote to pause all transfer decisions until Mr. Langston can speak for himself fully." Several others nodded. "Agreed," someone else said. Malcolm tried to interrupt, but no one listened. Martin closed the laptop. "We'll be in touch soon. And for your sake, I suggest you hire your own lawyers." Back at the hospital, Nina smiled at Darius as the live feed ended. "You did it," she whispered. Darius blinked once, slow and steady. Yes, the war wasn't over. But the tide had... It had been 3 weeks since the board meeting. The hospital room felt different now. Brighter. Busier. Doctors came in more often. Darius had started to move his fingers again. His eyes followed people with more focus. The machines beeped with stronger rhythm. He was getting better, slowly but surely. Nina came in with her usual warm smile and a small notebook in her hand. "Guess what?" she said as she sat beside him. "They're reopening the investigation into your company. And Julian's helping the medical board prove you've been conscious for weeks." Darius blinked once. He already knew. Martin had been by earlier, and everything was in motion. Lawsuits were filed. Maya, Malcolm, and Terrence were being questioned. The company wasn't just saved, it was changing. But that wasn't the best part. "You're not going to believe this," Nina said, flipping her notebook open. "Remember the program I told you about? The one they stole?" He blinked once. "Yes." "Well, I'm building it again. From scratch. My own way this time. Martin and Julian are helping me set up my own company. And guess who's backing it?" She smiled wide. "You are." Darius blinked again, this time slowly. Nina wasn't joking. He had asked Martin to use part of his private fund to invest in her project. It was the first business move he'd made since waking up. "You believed in me," she said, her voice soft, "when no one else did." She stood and looked at him with pride. "Now it's my turn to believe in you. And don't worry, when you're fully recovered, I expect you to sit on my board." Darius gave the smallest twitch of a smile. Nina reached over and squeezed his hand gently. This time his fingers curled back just a little. Hope. A few minutes later, Julian walked in with a wheelchair and 2 nurses. "Time for your first trip outside this room," he said. "Fresh air does wonders." They carefully lifted Darius into the chair. It wasn't easy, but it was progress. And as they rolled him toward the garden courtyard, something felt different. Freedom. Nina walked beside him the whole way. Outside, the sun was warm, and the flowers were in bloom. It felt like a brand new chapter was beginning. Darius looked up at the sky. No blinking now, just watching. He had lost time, but not purpose. He had been silenced, but not defeated. And now, with new allies and a second chance, he was ready to rebuild. Only this time, he wouldn't be doing it alone.